Now, we can surely say that Oppenheimer is one of the leading movies of the past years, and in 2025, it is still the center of attention of film critics and viewers. Christopher Nolan's film became a phenomenon not only for the media but also for the audience. At the world box office, the film collected almost $1 billion, despite the fact that it is a 3-hour biopic about the creator of the atomic bomb. In early 2024, Oppenheimer led the Oscar race, receiving 12 nominations at the 96th Academy Awards. The movie ended up winning 7 awards, including Best Actor and Best Director. This movie has definitely made history, and we will continue discussing the iconic movies. In this video, we will try to understand how this movie is structured, who is Nolan criticizing in it, and can we call Oppenheimer the most important movie in the director's career?
The world will remember this day.
At first glance, Oppenheimer seems like just another Nolan genre exercise, this time in a biographical drama. The movie covers several decades in the life of Robert Oppenheimer, the physicist who headed the Manhattan Project that created the atomic bomb. Several side plots unfold against the backdrop. The persecution of the left wing during the McCarthyism era, the development of physics in the first half of the 20th century, and Oppenheimer's relationship with his wife and mistress. However, Nolan wouldn't be himself if he didn't redefine some of the standards of the genre. There are actually 2 main characters in the movie. The second is Lewis Strauss, the head of the Atomic Energy Commission, played by Robert Downey Jr. The entire movie is essentially built around a confrontation between these characters. Nolan's Strauss and Oppenheimer are doppelgangers whose stories reflect each other. The fates of both are decided during meetings that resemble a court hearing. Oppenheimer wants to retain influence over nuclear policy, while Strauss wants a seat in the Council of Ministers. In this sense, the biopic about the father of the atomic bomb is structurally reminiscent of another Nolan movie, The Prestige, where 2 magicians start a war against each other out of jealousy. In Oppenheimer, the conflict is also triggered by envy and resentment. Nolan compared Oppenheimer and Strauss to Mozart and Salieri. And before going to the cinema, he recommended watching Amadeus by Milos Forman, which reveals the relationship between the 2 composers. However, watching Oppenheimer, it is difficult to say whose side the director's sympathies remain on. Most likely, as in the case of The Prestige, Nolan equalizes the characters in the finale, where no one achieves unambiguous success. However, what matters in the movie is not the story itself, but the way it is told.
Algebra's like sheet music. The important thing isn't can you read music, it's can you hear it.
To separate the 2 main storylines, Nolan uses color segmentation. In the color storyline, we look at events from Oppenheimer's point of view, and the black and white one, mostly from Strauss's perspective. As the director explains, the monochrome part shows what is happening objectively, while the color part, on the contrary, subjectively. Even the script was written in the first person. Nolan used the same technique in Memento, but there it was intended to indicate how events unfolded, whether linear or not. We can say that Oppenheimer contains at least 2 movies filmed in 2 different techniques. Strauss's story is told in the language of a courtroom drama. In this storyline, Nolan seems to imitate the big Hollywood style of the middle of the last century, with monumental mise-en-scene and austere camera work. In the Oppenheimer line, the visual storytelling is more impressionistic, and from time to time the editing explodes with abstract images illustrating the intense mental activity. This approach corresponds with the personalities of the protagonists, the prosaic functionalist Strauss and the inspired poet Oppenheimer. We can see the same dualism in the music. While Oppenheimer's line is accompanied by rather agitated emotional melodies, Strauss's is often accompanied by calm minor tunes.
The United States needs to know about it.
In Nolan's movies, the viewers usually see events through the eyes of the protagonist. But in Oppenheimer, his thoughts and feelings are conveyed not through words, but through visual images. And if the characters talk about something important, most likely after a moment, we will see it on the screen.
Protons smash into nucleus, releasing neutrons to smash into other nuclei.
Some critics criticize Nolan for not showing in the movie the consequences of the nuclear strikes in Japan, but in terms of the method chosen, this is quite consistent since neither Oppenheimer nor Strauss could have witnessed the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What Oppenheimer definitely saw was the first bomb tests. This is what becomes the pivotal event in the movie. Nolan increases the tension by showing the preparations for the test in detail. He sacrifices editing logic by repeating the moment with the explosion to see it from the point of view of different characters. Nolan conveys the power of the moment by turning the music off abruptly. But it is one of the few scenes in the entire movie where silence hangs in the air.
And now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Words are powerless here. Nolan conveys the horror of the tragedy in Hiroshima and Nagasaki not through the use of the chronicle or its artistic reinterpretation, but through Oppenheimer's ominous vision in which the atomic explosion is reproduced. A flash of light and deafening silence. This scene is probably the most striking example of subjective narration in the movie. It looks as if it were not a biopic, but a real horror movie. It is important to understand that Oppenheimer is primarily a dialogue movie. Characters talk all the time. About Soviet spies, about quantum physics, or about the structure of the world after World War II and American politics. It is no exaggeration to say that it is Nolan's most conversational movie.
And there's a further observation post on that hill 20 miles away.
That's right.
Many viewers reasonably wondered why Nolan needed IMAX when there weren't that many impressive scenes in the movie, but the wider format allows to make the close-ups more majestic and picturesque, not to mention that it is a good way to involve the viewers in what is happening, bringing them closer to the characters. And with Ludwig Göransson's impressive orchestra music, which seems to never stop, the action takes on an opera-like scale. But in the dialogues, the director rejects sophisticated mise-en-scene and shows the conversations in rather functional ways. Each speaker is usually in their own frame. In terms of directing, this is not the most clever solution. However, Nolan needs it in order to maintain visual dynamics, and not through camera movement but through frequent changes in frames. You can notice this way of shooting dialogues even in the director's early works, where all the conversations are mostly in single, medium and close-up shots, sometimes not very accurately edited and without much attention to the mise-en-scene. On the other hand, Oppenheimer is not just a movie with a lot of dialogue, it is logically structured. There was a similar technique in Nolan's directorial debut Following, where the narrative was set by a police interrogation during which the main events of the movie were revealed. In Oppenheimer, the story of the bomb's development is framed by two long conversations: the commission on the physicist's case and the hearing on Strauss's appointment. The narrative here is structured mainly not chronologically, but according to the content of the dialogue. Therefore, the narrative rushes forward and then falls back. This is how virtuoso phrases appear and hold a chain of associations, not letting the viewer's attention wane. This gives Nolan room for his favorite game with time. The director can fit memories of different events, often from words of different characters, into one editing sequence. So hardly every splicing introduces new information. In general, it is not boring to watch at all.
Let's go recruit some scientists.
Why would I leave my family?
I told you, you can bring your family.
I'm not a soldier, Oppie.
A soldier? He's a general. I've got all the soldier I need.
Nolan makes a dizzying stream of consciousness out of a biographical movie that could have turned out to be a Wikipedia retelling. Oppenheimer, like many of the director's other films, is organized symmetrically. That is, some especially important events and images are repeated at least twice, but in different contexts. One of them is a short conversation between Einstein and Oppenheimer, which we see from Strauss's point of view at the beginning of the movie, and we learn its content at the end. The intrigue seems trivial, but it still captivates the imagination.
What did you say to him?
Oh, he's fine.
Such details create a kind of navigation system which prevents the audience from getting confused about what is going on. In addition, there are several cross-cutting images in the movie. For example, raindrops rhyme simultaneously with Oppenheimer's ideas about the quantum world and with the explosive waves that girdle the Earth. Traditionally, for better understanding, Nolan illustrates difficult parts, let's say with diagrams or other clear visual images.
They're hardly a substitute for a physics book, but it's enough to understand the movie, or it's enough to watch our review. It's just one example of how you can look deeper into a movie. If you're interested in such detailed analyses, support our channel, like this video and write a comment. It helps to get into YouTube recommendations so that as many movie lovers as possible will see our content.
What do you know about quantum mechanics?
I have a grasp on the basics.
Then you're doing it wrong.
And if you summarize Christopher Nolan's 20-year career in filmmaking, you could say that almost all of his movies are about complicated men. Memento was about suffering bereavement. The Prestige was about the high price of male competition. Interstellar was about what it means to be a father. Even The Dark Knight looks like a story about overcoming typical male traumas. From this point of view, Oppenheimer logically continues the topic of the director's previous movies. In a certain sense, it is 8.5, that is, a movie about creativity.
Can that really happen?
The math says it can. If we can get published, then perhaps one day an astronomer finds one. But right now, all I have is theory, which can't impact people's lives.
It is no coincidence that Picasso's paintings and Thomas Eliot's Barren Land, a masterpiece of modernist literature, appear on the screen. In this way, Nolan fits his protagonist into the pleiad of radical authors of the 20th century who tried to penetrate into the mysteries of the universe and rethink the way we see the world.
Are we saying there's a chance that when we push that button, we destroy the world?
Nothing in our research.
Oppenheimer is ambitious and dreams of recognition, but eventually fails to cope with his own creation, is forced to painfully reap the fruits of his own labor, and makes his loved ones unhappy on the way to fame.
You can feel the dramatic pathos of the story by looking at the evolution of the protagonist as a whole, from an eccentric science enthusiast to the doubt-ridden father of the atomic bomb. The character's fragility is best seen by contrasting him with Leslie Groves, the supervisor of the Manhattan Project from the War Department. While Oppenheimer is a reflective intellectual, Groves is an uncompromising military man, so he's willing to achieve results at any cost.
What the hell were you doing in Chicago?
Visiting the Met.
Why?
You can't.
Why?
This is one of the main conflicts of the movie, between genius and the state. At first, Oppenheimer perceives the project of creating a bomb as a creative task for which it is necessary to find the most effective solution in the shortest possible time. The American government, in turn, intends to use the scientists' developments for their own purposes. In the movie, Oppenheimer is compared to Prometheus, who, according to myth, gave people fire. But the tragedy of the story is that fire can be used both for good and for evil. Perhaps for the first time in his career, Nolan clearly articulates the political meaning of the movie, the destructive nature of power. Nolan doesn't just emphasize personal dramas here, but reveals Oppenheimer as a poignant political statement about the future of humanity, increasingly dependent on weapons of mass destruction. Furthermore, in early 2025, many media agreed that the movie proved to be frighteningly prophetic against the backdrop of new rounds of a global arms race. Let's discuss it in the comments below.
They care who dropped it. I did.
In this case, the bomb is a symbol of power. Let's not forget that Kubrick saw a phallic symbol in the atomic bomb. Nolan is often criticized for the fact that women in his movies play secondary roles. We can say the same about the new movie. However, he is much more strict with men. Blinded by their lust for fame and dominance, they cause more suffering than good. Thus, Nolan undermines the image of a mysterious genius who has the power to decide the fate of the world.
Huh? I worked my whole life to get here.
Strauss's story is no less demonstrative. In his effort to ruin Oppenheimer's career, he ends up ruining his own. The director cleverly plays with the difference in scale in the final third of the movie, moving from issues of war and peace to office disputes to show the insignificance of competition for power. Nolan vividly demonstrates how poisonous competition between men can be.
I was not in a policy-making position at Los Alamos. I would have done anything I was asked to do. Well, then you would have built the H-bomb too.
Cillian Murphy shows it brilliantly at the level of acting. Dull gaze and restrained movements convey the exhausted state of the protagonist better than words. We know that the real Oppenheimer did not often speak publicly about his feelings after the bombing. However, Murphy manages to tell us in body language about the character's torment. His work in Oppenheimer has already become one of the most cited and studied examples of acting in film schools, and in 2024, it brought Murphy his first Oscar and Golden Globe. Given Nolan's outstanding filmography, Oppenheimer is unlikely to eclipse any of the director's other films. However, it's important to the movie industry for another reason. Ironically, the 3-hour drama about the creator of the atomic bomb has become one of those projects that revive the belief that auteur films can equally compete with major franchises, and streaming platforms are not yet able to shut down cinema theaters. Even though Oppenheimer turned out to be a topical movie, Nolan avoids unambiguous conclusions and moralizing, as if asking the viewers to point to the story themselves.
The participants of the Manhattan Project believed that by creating the most powerful weapon in history, they would put an end to all wars. But time proves that this is not the key to eternal peace. In the same way, our channel proves that high-quality videos about movies can be as entertaining as the movies themselves. Let's create a space for deep analysis together. It's very simple. If you like what we do, then help other movie lovers learn about us. Just like this video, write a comment, share this video with your friends, and go to the channel to subscribe and keep watching other videos.